Hi, sweet friends. Today I want to share with you the 5 most surprising anti-inflammatory foods. So if you're tired of people telling you to always eat your greens and your berries, you're going to love the 5 foods that I'm going to share with you today, because not only are they delicious, they're fantastic at tamping down inflammation. The first thing I want to share is that I have a very detailed blog post that corresponds with this video, and the reason is because these anti-inflammatory foods are surprising, I wanted to curate all the medical research for you in one place so that you could read about it, because I'm not a medical doctor or any type of medical professional. So instead, I've got all the research for you so that you can see that yes, these foods are actually anti-inflammatory. And if at any time you want to jump ahead in this video, I'll have the timestamps in the description below. Anti-inflammatory food number 1, grass-fed butter. Butter made from the cream of cows that have been raised on pasture instead of grain is very high in omega-3 fatty acids. And I think we've probably all heard a lot about omega-3 fatty acids in salmon and how good that is for tamping down inflammation in our bodies. But butter from pastured cows, from the cream from pastured cows, is also extremely high in omega-3s. And the darker yellow the butter, the better. Now, I just want to interject here for a second and mention to you that what I'm sharing with you are things that I bought at the grocery store. And I did that to show you that if you're tight on time, these are things you can find most likely at your grocery store. However, I have also showed you how to make most of these foods homemade. I just want you to know you have options. For example, if you have access to cream from cows that have been raised on pasture, you can turn that cream into butter very easily, and I've showed you how to do this in a video. And the nice thing about it is you also get the byproduct of having real buttermilk. And I also show you how to take that cream and take it one step further by culturing it. So now you have cultured butter, cultured grass-fed butter, that not only contains all of the wonderful anti-inflammatory properties we're going to talk about today, it's also cultured, which means it's high in good bacteria. And good bacteria, probiotics, are wonderful for gut health. Now you may be wondering, why are we so worried about inflammation in the first place, and why do we want to tamp down inflammation? Inflammation, to a certain extent, can be helpful. Like if you cut yourself or something, that's an inflammation, and everything in your body runs to heal that cut, and that's a very good response. But you don't want inflammation 100% of the time in your body, because it causes damage, and damage leads to disease. So we want to always be working to tamp down inflammation by eating a diet of foods that are high in anti-inflammatory properties, foods that tamp down inflammation, foods that tamp down the damage caused by inflammation. And another great property of grass-fed butter is that it's very high in conjugated linoleic acid, usually abbreviated CLA. CLA not only has anti-inflammatory properties, it may also help to boost our immune system. So we're getting 2 for the price of 1. We're tamping down inflammation and we're boosting our immunity. Now, moving beyond omega-3s, butter also has something very special in it, specifically butter that is from cows that have been raised, or from the cream of cows that have been raised on pasture. And that's something called butyric acid. The cream that's used to make butter that came from cows that have been pastured is very high in butyric acid. Now, I hope I'm pronouncing that relatively well. I do my best. But this butyric acid is wonderful for our digestive system. Butyric acid is basically, in layman's terms, a food that our digestive tract loves. And the reason our digestive tract loves it is because it tamps down inflammation. And the less inflamed our digestive tract is, the better it is at absorbing nutrients from the foods we consume. Now, I just want to quickly say, if you have digestive disorders, be sure to read up on butyric acid and discuss it with your doctor and see if it would be appropriate for you to eat foods that are high in that particular ingredient. So the good news is, if you like butter, and personally I'm wondering who wouldn't, but if you like butter, as I do, you can certainly add this to your list of anti-inflammatory foods. And the good news is, yes, we're encouraged to eat a lot of leafy greens, but you know what? When we eat those leafy greens, if we toss them in butter, all the better, because not only do we have the omega-3s and the butyric acid that the grass-fed butter has to offer, you also are able to better absorb the nutrients that the greens have to offer, because eating vegetables that have been steamed or cooked in whatever way you like to prepare them and then tossed in butter makes them more nutritious, because it's the fat that allows you to absorb a lot of the nutrients in those greens. So surprising anti-inflammatory food number 1, grass-fed butter. I just wanted to pop in for a second in case you're new here and we're meeting for the first time. I'm Mary from marysnest.com and author of the Modern Pioneer Cookbook, and I want to welcome you to my kitchen. I'm so glad that you're here. Anti-inflammatory food number 2, meat raised from pastured animals and pastured poultry. Just as grass-fed butter is high in omega-3 fatty acids, so is meat from animals raised on pasture and pastured poultry. These are all high in omega-3 fatty acids. And not only is their meat rich in omega-3s, if you use their meat to make bone broth, your bone broth is very anti-inflammatory. And I have a lot of videos where I show you how to make all kinds of bone broth. Beef, poultry, fish, on and on and on. Now, unlike meat and chickens that have been grain-fed, which can actually be inflammatory, meat and chickens that have been raised on pasture have very high anti-inflammatory properties. And the fat contained within them is also high in the CLA, similar to the cream from cows that have been raised on pasture. So you have the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids and you have the benefits of CLA, both which are very anti-inflammatory when we consume them. So if you enjoy eating meat and you enjoy eating chickens, then you really need to look into trying to find meats and chickens that have been raised on pasture. And the farther you get along on your traditional foods journey and you're able to move money around in your food budget because you're not buying a lot of processed foods anymore and you're making more foods homemade, of which I show you how to make a lot of foods homemade, and you can save money to move into buying grass-fed beef, buying pastured chickens, which generally are more costly than their grain-fed options, but because you're moving the money around in your grocery budget that you're saving from the other foods that you were used to buy that you now make homemade, you probably will be able to afford these. And also, don't forget, I have a lot of coupon codes for you, and I'll be sure to link to them in the description below, including one for U.S. wellness meats that sell grass-fed beef, lamb, pork, pastured poultry, everything that you can need for your traditional foods kitchen when it comes to animal products. And be sure to get to know the ranchers and the farmers in your area, either maybe just starting out at the farmer's market and then also maybe visiting them at their farms or ranches, because you may be able to buy in bulk from them at a deeply discounted price. And if you can buy a whole cow, even if you go in with some other families and maybe divide it up 4 ways, you can really get a bargain. So these are all things to look into as you continue on your traditional foods journey and want to add pastured beef, grass-fed beef, and pastured chickens into your repertoire. And a little bonus I want to share with you is if you like the crispy skin of a roast chicken and you are using a pastured chicken, that chicken skin is very rich in a whole host of properties: antimicrobial, antibacterial, antiviral. It's amazing. And it's so wonderful because it's also so delicious. And best of all, when you use the bones and scraps from beef or the bones and scraps from your roast chicken, and then you turn those into bone broth, those are very high in anti-inflammatory properties. And I have lots of videos where I've showed you how to make bone broth, and I'll be sure to link to the curated playlist that I have for you in the description below. So anti-inflammatory food number 2, grass-fed meat and pastured poultry. Number 3, naturally fermented vegetables. Now, over the years, with the rise of popularity of fermented vegetables, there's been a lot of scientific interest in studying these. But most of the research has focused on their good bacteria, their probiotics, and the influence that that good bacteria has on our gut health. But what scientists started to find interest in was that by improving gut health, you're also, again, as we discussed earlier with butter, you're tamping down inflammation in the digestive tract. The better our digestive health is, scientists tell us the healthier we are because we can better absorb the nutrients from the foods we eat. And so all this scientific research focus on the probiotics, the good bacteria that's contained in these type of foods, led to them wanting to also investigate the inflammatory properties of these type of foods, because they're improving our gut health, and by doing so, are they also tamping down inflammation? And it looks as though they very well might be. Now, the research in studying the anti-inflammatory properties of fermented foods is more in its infancy as compared to all of the research that has been done on the benefits of the probiotics contained in these foods. It does seem to just be from a common sense level that if we're improving gut health and we're improving our ability to absorb the nutrients from the foods that we eat, and hopefully we're eating a traditional foods diet, that would lead to tamping down inflammation, especially in our digestive tract, and hopefully by doing so, that helps tamp down inflammation in our entire body. So this has become a very interesting subject to scientists, and I'll be sure to share what I've found so far on the research regarding the anti-inflammatory properties of fermented foods, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more information, a lot more scientific studies coming down the pike, so to speak, in the years ahead. But it's definitely worth learning how to make these type of fermented foods. It's a lot more reasonable than actually having to buy them, but if you're tight on time and your budget allows, fermented foods are very common today. You can find them at pretty much every grocery store, especially sauerkraut. You just want to make sure that it has been naturally fermented, that you're not buying it in a can in the area where all the canned foods are sold, because that's been heated and that's destroyed the good bacteria that would be naturally occurring in a naturally fermented cabbage that's been then turned into sauerkraut. And we don't want to destroy that good bacteria. We want to make sure that we're getting that into our bodies. So be sure to include fermented foods in your diet on a daily basis. And hopefully you'll be improving your gut health and in turn, tamping down a little bit of inflammation. So anti-inflammatory food number 3, fermented vegetables. Anti-inflammatory food number 4, cultured dairy. Now we're going to talk about all of these, but I just have to start with this cheese. Aged cheeses that are hard like this, and in this case like Parmigiano Reggiano, are very high not only in good probiotics, the good bacteria, but they also contain anti-inflammatory properties. Now, I don't think we can ask for anything better than that, at least in my case, being of Italian heritage, and specifically Northern Italian heritage. I love Parmigiano Reggiano. The only thing you need to make sure is that you buy the real deal, the Parmigiano Reggiano. And you want to make sure that it's actually from the proper region in Italy, where it is very heavily regulated on how it's prepared. And if it is prepared properly, and that's what you buy. You buy the real deal. You can enjoy it knowing that not only are you getting good probiotics for your gut health, you're also consuming a food that has anti-inflammatory properties. So similar to fermented vegetables, also often called cultured vegetables, cultured dairy is also very rich in probiotics, the good bacteria that's good for our gut health. And this has been studied, cultured dairy has been studied in a little more detail in relation to how that good bacteria, those probiotics, may also be providing anti-inflammatory properties. Now, there are a couple of things that you want to focus on. Number one, you want to make sure that the dairy you're buying is actually cultured. And it will say it. In this case, this particular brand, they actually have it right in their name. But you can also find out by simply reading the ingredients on the back. And it'll mention that the cultures they've used to culture the dairy. Now, for an extra added benefit, if you find cultured dairy that's also from the milk of animals that have been raised on pasture, you're really guaranteed a wonderful anti-inflammatory kick, so to speak, because that dairy is going to be high in the same things that the butter was high in, specifically the omega-3s and the CLA. Now, in order to enjoy those anti-inflammatory benefits of the omega-3s and the CLAs, you want to be buying those cultured dairy products that are made from whole milk, because a lot of those anti-inflammatory properties are contained in the milk fat. So cottage cheese made from the whole milk of grass-fed cows and then cultured is a wonderful food to have in your traditional foods kitchen. Now, I've showed you how to make cottage cheese on the stovetop, but I've not showed you how to take that one step further and culture it. So let me know if that's something that you're interested in learning. The good news is when I do make stovetop cottage cheese, I like to use milk that's come from cows that have been pasture raised. So it's high in omega-3s and high in CLA. So just knowing that much, if you are buying dairy products that you can't find that have been cultured, at the very least, if they're made from whole milk that is from animals that have been grass-fed, at least you're getting that level of anti-inflammatory property. But when you culture it, it seems like you give it a really good boost. So the more cultured grass-fed dairy we can find, the better. Now, in addition to cottage cheese, you have a whole host of dairy products out there today that are often both from grass-fed animals as well as cultured. What I've got here is a kefir or kefir, depending on how you say it. And I've showed you how to make real milk kefir from the actual grains. This is usually cultured in a different way than with the actual grains, but it's still a very probiotic-rich beverage and very good for you. And this is from the A2 milk. And I know a lot of you have shared with me that that milk tends to agree with you a little more than other types of milk. And this, I found this right at my grocery store. This is becoming very common and very, very available. So definitely keep your eyes open for grass-fed cultured kefir. And then here what I've got is one, if cow's milk is not something that you drink on a regular basis and you prefer goat's milk, I know that can be very agreeable to many people. This is a goat milk kefir, and again, right at my local grocery store. Another wonderful option, yogurt. And this particular brand, and there's a number of them today, is made not only from organic whole milk, it's also made from organic whole milk that came from cows that were pastured. Cultured buttermilk can also be a wonderful anti-inflammatory food. The only drawback about this particular one is that it's made from low-fat milk, so you lose some of the wonderful anti-inflammatory properties associated with the fat that's in whole milk. So if you do buy buttermilk and can find, I know there's one at my grocery store that is made from whole milk all the better. But this was what they had in stock at the time, and this is the low-fat version. But again, this, just like the bottled kefir from your grocery store, buttermilk from your grocery store is also just a dairy product that it's milk that then has been cultured. And it's different than the liquid that comes off of when you're making homemade butter. That liquid is real buttermilk. And if you make butter the way I show you, where we culture the cream before we make butter, that side product or byproduct is cultured buttermilk, real cultured buttermilk. Now, it'll look watery, but if you go ahead and put that in your refrigerator, within a few, maybe a week or so, maybe a little longer, it's going to start to actually thicken up, and it's going to be real cultured buttermilk. And that is a wonderful, it's such a nutrient-rich food, and definitely something worth thinking about. When you don't discard that when you make homemade butter, especially if you've cultured the butter. I cultured the cream before making the butter. But in the case of cultured buttermilk, what's done is they take actual whole milk. In this case, they took low-fat milk, unfortunately. But if you find one that's made with whole milk and it's been cultured, it's a food similar to like cultured kefir, yogurt, cultured cottage cheese. These all have a lot of things in common when they are made with whole dairy. So be sure to search out those products that you can find at your local grocery store that are made with whole milk and also cultured, because you're not only going to give your body a wonderful probiotic boost, you're going to also help tamp down inflammation in your digestive tract, which will then hopefully help tamp down inflammation in our bodies. Now, I want to mention something about whole milk plain yogurt. You can turn this into a homemade type of cream cheese. And I show you how to do it in a video. It's very easy to do. And basically, you're going to strain it, and then you're going to take it one step further. And when it's all done, it's going to look like a block of cream cheese that you would buy at the grocery store. But the good news is your cream cheese is going to be made from whole milk yogurt, and it's going to be rich in probiotics and anti-inflammatory properties. So you can't beat that. And I'll be sure to put a link in the description below to a curated playlist where I have all the videos where I've showed you how to make, also how to make yogurt. You can eventually just start making your own homemade yogurt with nothing more than a bowl. You don't need any special appliances. You start with a little store-bought yogurt, and then you go from there. And it's going to be a very rich, probiotic-rich homemade yogurt. And I also show you how to make milk kefir, cottage cheese, buttermilk, a whole host of homemade dairy. And I'll have that link to that playlist in the description below. So anti-inflammatory food number 4, cultured dairy. Now, when I did my research and read about the next food that I'm going to share with you, I was really surprised. Now, I think we're all familiar with the fact that when we hear about processed breads, that's not something that we should be eating in our traditional foods kitchen. We often hear that processed breads cause inflammation, and specifically sort of those white breads that are sold in the plastic sleeve at the grocery store either are devoid of nutrition or can even go one step further and cause inflammation in our body. So best to avoid those. But what do we do in a traditional foods kitchen? We may bring whole grains into our kitchen, and we may make whole grain breads, but we might find that we have trouble digesting them. And then we may read that even whole grain breads can cause inflammation. Now what are we supposed to do? Well, as many of us as traditional foods cooks know, that there has been a huge interest in sourdough starter and sourdough bread. And with that rising interest, scientists were also interested in understanding why people were drawn to sourdough bread and why they were finding that agreed with them and that they could digest it. But something very surprising came out of that research. Scientists were studying sourdough breads. And this is recent research I think you'll really enjoy reading in that blog post that I have for you, where I go into a lot of detail about this. Scientists were studying sourdough bread, and what they found was that sourdough bread specifically made from a certain grain, not just any sourdough bread, but sourdough bread specifically made from spelt, one of the ancient grains, had anti-inflammatory properties. How about that? Now, maybe in time they'll go on to study breads made with einkorn and emmer, the other, you might also know it as farro, the other ancient grains. But as of right now, the research that I'm going to share with you, or that I share with you in that blog post, is on sourdough made from spelt. And the good news is, I have a lot of videos where I show you how to make a sourdough starter and make sourdough bread, but specifically how to make sourdough bread with spelt. If spelt is new to you, as I mentioned earlier, it's an ancient grain, one of the three major ancient grains. We've got einkorn, which is the most ancient, we've got emmer or farro, and then we've got spelt. And spelt is becoming more and more common to find. I was very surprised that I've been seeing spelt flour at my grocery store. And if you buy spelt grain and you like to grind it in your grain mill and have fresh spelt flour, all the better. And if you know me, now I bought my mock mill myself. I did a lot of research. It wasn't given to me. And I finally decided on the mock mill. And I love that mill. And I'll be sure to put more information about that in the description below. But that's a great grain mill. But getting back to the ancient grains, if you like spelt, and I do, and I think that even if you've never had it and you try it, you're going to find that it's very similar, because it's an ancient grain, it's an ancient wheat. And it's very similar in taste to modern day wheat. And it bakes up very similarly to using modern day whole wheat. But you have the benefit of it being an ancient grain. And when you make it into a bread that you've made with a sourdough starter, it contains anti-inflammatory properties. But you're in luck. If you're not up for baking right now, you're just learning about sourdough, you're just learning about making a sourdough starter, and you may not have any spelt grain or spelt flour, don't worry. There's another option that scientists found had anti-inflammatory properties, and that's bread made from sprouted flour. Now, I show you how to sprout grain and how to dry it and how to mill it into flour and use it to make a sprouted flour bread. But if that's not in your, so to speak, bailiwick of skills at this point, where depending where you are on your traditional foods journey, the good news is these breads are very common, and these are easy to find at most grocery stores. At my grocery store, I've found that these are usually sold in the frozen food section. And chances are that's probably because breads made from sprouted grains may not have the same shelf life as those breads that are made with processed grains, with a white flour, or even the whole grain flour that are sold in the plastic sleeve in the bread aisle, because they often have various preservatives added to them, whereas these sprouted flour breads generally don't. When grain is sprouted and turned into flour and then used to make bread, the reason it contains anti-inflammatory properties is because the sprouting process increases the antioxidant nature of the grain. And those antioxidants are specifically known as polyphenols. And polyphenols tap down inflammation. For me personally, I can digest sourdough bread made from spelt flour. I can also digest breads made from sprouted flour. And I'm glad to learn that they have anti-inflammatory properties for those of us who can digest these foods. However, if you have any type of gluten-related disease or some type of intolerance to gluten, these are the type of foods that you want to talk to your doctor or nutritionist or dietitian about to see if these are foods that you can introduce to your diet. You may not be able to, but you have a lot of other anti-inflammatory foods to choose from. But I did want to share this with you because for those of us who can digest these types of breads, we do have something to add to our anti-inflammatory repertoire. Now, if you'd like more information about anti-inflammatory foods, how to make various anti-inflammatory foods, and how to include them in your traditional foods kitchen, be sure to click on this video over here where I have a playlist all about that and more. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.